And good evening, everybody, and welcome to Scary Stories by the Campfire. We are your hosts, Jeremy.
And Jason.
Cool, cool. And we just want to say, first and foremost, thank you for anybody who's going to be joining us tonight. Um, it's our first time doing this, so we're really, really excited for it. Um,
hmm
got a lot to cover and a lot to talk about. Mostly just want to be able to give y'all some insight into who we are and what brought us into that genre in this wonderful world of horror that seems to keep drawing us and everybody else in all the time. So, Jace, why don't you start us off? Why don't you
All
get this
right.
little ball rolling?
So horror's been an interesting subject for me. It's been something that I've gotten um, attached to quite recently. Um, but back in when I was younger, it was always like it was that subject that you kind of knew about because your parents were like always watching and whatnot. I know our mom always she grew up on this stuff. But I didn't get into it until and it, actually just a couple of years back is when I really kind of started diving into it. And I think the biggest thing is just how different it is. It's the you got all sorts of horror out there. You've got um, like dark comedies and slashers, and you know, there's if you're into horror, there's going to be something out there for you. So that being said, um, yeah, it's just it's something I've really gotten into, and I keep digging even further and finding new things that I like.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with honestly all of that. Like you said, our mom, we're brothers, so our mom really loves that the horror genre, especially the slasher flicks. Like those old school slasher flicks are her bread and butter. That's what she loves to watch. Um, Friday the
Friday the 13th.
13th,
Mm-hmm,
spot on.
mm-hmm.
That's one of those that she just can't get enough of. But it's like you said, it doesn't. If you're a horror fan, you'll always find something you enjoy. Um, it doesn't matter how big of a horror fan you are. Um, the dark comedies, is that branch off, and you may not like slasher flicks, but you love dark comedies, so you're still encompassed with us in that love for the horror genre. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess we'll dive into a little bit of background. Our first introduction into the genre. Um, wow, I don't know 7 or 8 years old, and I watched Halloween with Michael Myers and Jamie Lee Curtis. And I remember watching it with my mom, of all people, 7 or 8 years old, watching, this tall, shaped figure killing babysitters. And I just remember it capturing, and kind of like you, I didn't start getting into it, really diving deep into the genre until about 10 years ago. But it's been a hole that I'm glad I went down. I can't. I'll say that it's a hole that I want to keep exploring and keep finding new stuff about it.
My earliest recollection of a horror movie. I'm not going to say it's probably my first exposure, but it is the first one that I remember seeing when I was younger. Was it was Alien. Saw it when I was what? I was probably like 9. I think we were living on Guam at the time, and yeah, that at the time that movie was probably one of the scariest things I've seen. I don't even think I sat through the entire thing. There was like, several instances. I'm like closing my eyes. I'm like, oh my god, what is that thing? And um, but yeah, it was weird because when I had saw, because my friend he was a fan of the movie. He was probably just as young as I was, but he had the movie that he was always watching, and he had the little action figures. Right, he had these action figures, and we would play with them all the time. We'd play with little action figures, little aliens, all the different types of aliens, little bull aliens, and gorilla aliens, and scorpion aliens, and stuff like that. And he's like, "Hey, you want to watch this movie?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to watch this movie." And then I watched the movie, and I was like, "Oh my god, that was a scary movie. I don't know if I like that movie." But yeah, so it was the first time I seen and it's probably one of my favorite movies. Aliens, the sequel is by far also one of my favorite movies. Probably watched that more times than I watched the first one.
Well,
Um,
well, we do have our first question. So I'll let you answer it first. What is your favorite genre in the horror tree? I guess is
all
the
right.
best way to say it. So if horror is the
Yeah, yeah.
tree, what is your favorite branch from it?
So this one comes from Raven. My favorite genre of horror. Um, I'm gonna have to go with probably something along the lines of like a dark comedy, something with a lot of humor to it, like uh, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. That's one of
Yeah.
them that comes to mind. There's a movie I recently saw on Shudder. Corporate, I think, Corporate Animals, I believe is what it was called. It
Oh
dealt
yeah,
with a
you were
bunch
telling
of
me about that.
minor, or not minors. They were corporate workers, and they were in a mine or some sort of cavern. They got trapped in there. That one had a lot of humor to it. So something that you can mix like the dark tone of like a subject and just make it funny. It yeah
It's
it makes it interesting.
so mine would have to be those psychological, suspenseful horrors. Um, kind of like the Color Out of Space that just came out based off the H.P. Lovecraft story. Those ones
Ooh, it's a good one.
that just kind of build the suspense, and it's not that jump scare horror, but it's that suspense building horror that just kind of makes you start thinking a lot more. Um,
That is actually a pretty good the horror of the like take Jaws for example. That slow build up where they don't show the creature or the monster or whatever until like the end. Even though it's a shark. It's a shark, but they don't show the shark. And the first time you see the shark is when he's throwing out that chum or whatever. You see it come out of the water for the first time, and you're like, oh yeah, that's scary because you never get to see what it is. But
makes people
um,
not want to go in the
yeah,
water anymore.
yeah,
Um, Second would have to be slashers. They're always fun, good or bad. Slashers are fun. Um,
yeah, a good slasher. I like a good creature film, something like Gremlins. Gremlins was always
oh,
a pretty good
Gremlins
one.
was good. Critters was really good.
Critters.
Uh, those little, they're like monster movies, but they're not like big monster like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein monster. They're like itty bitty little ones that just look
Yeah,
freaking
there
weird.
was I I remember, and one of the other interesting aspects that really catches that caught my attention when I was younger about the horror movies was um, I remember when we were Oh, I can't remember where we were living at the time, but we were walking through the store and they had the VHS tapes on the shelf, right? And we were looking at the horror section, and I remember seeing a couple box covers, right? And two of them, two of them, to this day still stand out. Okay, one of them I know absolutely. I know what it is. That was Jason Goes to Hell, right? Had the iconic hockey mask, had that snake thing crawling through the eyes and whatnot.
Yep.
There was a second one. There's a second one. It was, um, and I thought I thought this was some sort of like fever dream or something because I could never remember. I remember the image, but I could never remember what the movie was called. And the image was like there was a kid. He's sitting on a staircase. It would look like maybe like down into a basement or something. And behind him, at the top of the stairs, there was an open door, and it had like this monster standing there with like this axe or something. And I was like, and it that was just like the creepiest thing I'd ever seen. Like, and the kid's just sitting there, he's just like, he had this look on his face, like he wasn't even aware of what was behind him. And as a kid, I'm like, that's creepy. Could never remember the movie. Found it maybe just a couple of years ago. Trolls, Troll 2, and Trolls 2. And I'm like, really? That movie, which I have known about. Apparently, they just didn't use that. That was like one of their older box cover arts, and I just happened to come across it. I'm like, oh my god, I'm not crazy. That exists.
Wow, that let's see. Like the first, and it's funny that you go back to that because if you look back at films from back then, these old school VHS box arts were great, and I remember, it was actually quite funny. I still remember the box art to Tremors, the original Tremors, and
Yeah, this is a good one.
it it was great because you look at this box art and it's like a close up of the ground, and at the top of the box it shows the four characters all standing on the top, but they're very small. And coming up from the bottom of the box art is one of the graboid, but it's not the graboid itself, it's the tentacle part. So you're sitting there,
The
the
tongue that it's got.
yeah, one of the three tongues that come out. So you're sitting there
Very.
looking at it, and you're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." So I'm gonna rent it. So you get it and you watch it, and it turns out that cover art isn't even what's in the movie, like as the main thing. Like it's just a
Uh,
piece of the big giant underground swimming worm.
I'm I'm gonna say that was like a tribute to Jaws because it's very Jaws esque where you got the people up on top and the big thing coming up from underneath them. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It just so what, and this is going to be a kind of a loaded question, but what is your favorite horror movie that has
Oh,
come
favorite
out?
my favorite horror movie that has come out or like a recent one, like a
Let's go
newer
just
movie,
that you've
just
seen
in general.
in
In
general.
general. Oh, I mean, it's a good question. It's kind of the it's favorite favorite horror movie. It's gonna be difficult to say because you can't compare some of them like you can't compare Alien to Tucker and Dale. There's just two different genres. You can like both of them for different reasons, but I want to say
Well, if that's the case, what's
that
that go-to horror movie that you can just watch over and over and over again and never get bored?
oh god, it's not my favorite, but a go-to one would be probably Scream. I like watching Scream. It's just so um, meta for its time, and it's kind of a refreshing thing. And nowadays, you're continuously getting more Scream movies, so you know there's like a resurgence of interest and whatnot. But there's it's just a crazy movie, and the acting in it, you get like Matthew Lillard's performance, and he's insane in that movie. It's great. It's just something you can quote it, quote it, and just have a good time with it.
I think his best scene in that entire movie, I think his best acting performance in that movie is at the end when he has the phone in his hand and he's already been stabbed and he's already gone through the woozy scene, but he's got the phone and he's like, "My mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me," but
I
he
mean,
does
yeah.
it in such a great way, and
Hmm.
there's just so much into it, and it's beautiful to watch. That entire cast was great, um, in my opinion.
So, Jeremy, passing the question back off to you.
Ah, so like you, I don't have a favorite. It depends on that subgenre. Um, but my go-to, oh, Halloween, all day.
Halloween.
Halloween.
Halloween's a good one.
That you had, and the reason is because you had your slasher flicks before it, but like a Halloween kind of set this new bar or this new level for slasher flicks when it came out. It had this feeling to it that started getting replicated more and more as movies started coming out. You see a lot of similarities between Halloween and Friday the 13th, especially part 2 and part 3. You get a lot more of that
Hmm.
Halloween feel uh, with Jason and Michael. There's a lot of similarities between the two of them. So uh, it's a very groundbreaking film. Um, and I can't get over the head nod every time Michael like pins the the dude to the wall, and he just kind of tilts his head, like, "Oh, look at the beautiful artwork I just made." you know that it was a great cast, great story, just a all around pleasure to watch, and it's one of those every Halloween, every October. It's what I watch right off the get go. Um,
All right, let's see here. It looks like Raven Fire has sent another question. What scares you the most in a horror film?
I'll take. I'll,
Jeremy, you want to start with that one?
yeah, I'll take this one, and it's actually two things. The more realistic the horror film is, um, that to me kind of scares me the. It's one of the things that scares me the most. Um, and by that I mean like stuff that you know could actually happen. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in today's world. So going piggyback off of your movie Scream, I think that's one of the reasons why Scream did so well. Is because it wasn't some uh by this point killer who's came back to life, 3 or 4
Like a
times.
zombie Jason.
Yeah, like zombie Jason. This was two people, you know, and you're watching the movie and he's like popping up randomly and you're like, "Oh my god, how is he doing?" And you find out it's two people working together. You know, it's one of those things that's like it could actually happen, and I think that kind of like ingrains into me of like, oh crap, like this could legitimately happen tomorrow. Uh
Um, for me, what scares me the most in a horror film, is an I guess you can call it an uncertainty. Like most horror movies, especially like slasher flicks, you got a group of people, you got a killer, and he picks them off one at a time, and then by the end of it, he ends up dead or incarcerated or something. It's a pattern. Each movie kind of follows the same thing. What scares me is when you're going through a movie, you're watching a movie, and you may start seeing that pattern. You may go, okay, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, and then right at the end, they kind of twist it on you, and the killer either gets away, and all your protagonists are, all your protagonists are killed. Final girl, kill her off at the end, and the killer gets away, and you're just kind of like, wow, that's something I didn't see. It's an uncertainty of whether all these characters are going to make it or whether none of them are going to make it. I've seen a couple movies like that, and sometimes it's a good thing. You get to watch the movie and you go, wow, you know it's an interesting take. And sometimes it actually breaks the movie because you're like, I like all these certain characters, and now you just kill them off. So what am I rooting for now? But yeah, I think it's a type of uncertainty that scares me. But I've actually been on the hunt recently to try to find something that was uh really scary. I mean, when I started getting back into the horror genre and watching the movies and whatnot, I've been trying to find something that really scares me. And I think the last movie that I watched that I tried to do that with was Hereditary. It wasn't like the most frightening film. It didn't keep me up at night, but it was a rather disturbing film, to say the least.
Oh
Very
yeah,
good movie, but it was just very unsettling.
definitely. Well, since we figured out what scares us the most in a horror film, what do you love about the horror genre?
What do I love about the horror genre? I like that it can be kind of a universal thing for everyone. Like I said, I guess the primary thing with horror is that it's stark subject. It's scary. But you can add some humor to it. You can add some. You can do it with uh subject about isolation or being trapped somewhere, or you can throw a monster in there, or just some everyday slasher, or you know, you can do so much with it. It's a very adaptable genre that you can use with a lot of things. It actually mixes pretty well. I'm waiting to find out to see if they get. I mean, they may even have a couple of horror romantics out there. Romances. Um,
Oh yeah, that's what we need,
um,
a horror rom com.
yeah, definitely not my cup of tea there. But I'm just saying that you can really kind of splice it with anything. It's an interesting subject.
And you know, piggying back off of that, I have to agree with you because like there's yeah, horror, it's supposed to be scary, so on and so forth. But like there's it's like you said, there's so much more you can incorporate. So like, you have your major genres of, filmmaking where you have um action, you have comedy, you have horror, you have science fiction, so on and so forth. All the
Thrillers.
thrillers, you have all these major genres. But with the horror genre, it's so adaptable that you can pull these other major genres into it and still keep that horror element about it while including these other genres of filmmaking. So, like Tucker and Dale versus Evil, it's that horror slasher genre, but there's so much comedy to it. You're constantly laughing at it. And
Or you can get like Hugh Jackman in Van Helsing. It's like an action film, but you still have like your werewolves and your vampires and all that stuff. It's action packed. It's so like adaptability changes.
I think the other thing I love about it is there's going into the adaptability, and I said it earlier, uh, there's just something for everybody. You know, a lot of people who say they love, this movie, I'm like, oh, well, that's a horror movie. Well, I don't like horror. Well, I'm like, well, that's considered one. Like, so there's some
Yeah.
movie in this genre that somebody likes, and
Hmm.
it's literally one of those genres for everybody. You can always find a horror movie that has that genre attached to that somebody likes. While like some people don't like action movies like at all, they don't care to see people fighting and stuff like that. But they'll watch. They don't technically like the horror movies either, but they'll watch Tucker and Dale because it's a comedy, but it's also a horror. Stuff like that. It's that adaptability, like you said, and that ability to catch different audiences and hold their attention the entire time.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what if we've talked about what we don't like, but let's kind of dive into what we don't like. What do you not like about the genre? Because we can honestly talk all day about uh, what we like, but it's harder to talk about what we don't like, in my opinion.
Um, what do I don't like about horror? I think, in my opinion, that sometimes, depending on which movie we're talking about, which movie we're getting into, usually the characters themselves, it feels like you get like in the Friday the 13th remake, the cast was just kind of bleh. They're it's stereotypical. Teenagers doing things they shouldn't, and they're just sometimes they're just boring characters, and a lot of times you're rooting for the iconic Michael Myers or the Freddy Krueger or the Jason Voorhees uh to kill these people off because that's what you're there for. Now, that's not to say all movies are like that. I mean, like Aliens. I just about liked all the main colonial marines. They're all likable characters. Um, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. The two main characters there. Was it Nancy and Glenn? Right? They were likable characters. So you do get these likable characters, but you know, a lot of movies you just don't get that feel. It's like they're just there to be the meat, and sometimes it hurts a movie, sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's like, well, that's what they're there for. We don't really care, but sometimes I just prefer a stronger cast sometimes or well written characters.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, it's you're watching these movies, and like you said, you're rooting for the killer because there's no. Not only do they not provide any kind of investment into these characters, they never even give them the light of day to invest, or even any part of the scripts to invest that time in, and to have you build that connection with the character. You
Yeah, and
know,
a lot of them are kind of like the stereotype characters. You got the blonde chick, the jock, the nerdy guy. It's just sometimes like
cardboard
it's
cutouts.
yeah, they're like cookie cutter characters, and I mean some of them cabin in the woods. I mean, you had this cast of characters who were all these great characters, and then when they got out to the cabin, it, the whole point of it was kind of like wouldn't say a parody, but it was kind of a fresh retake on like that whole horror aspect of it. And those characters slowly started to devolve into these uh,
Yep.
stereotypes, and it was interesting to see because it, it does show that a lot of these movies just have these cookie cutter characters.
That, and I mean, the other thing I don't like about the genre, and you can say this about just about any movie nowadays, but you don't see it nearly as much now as you did back in the day. But just learning to call it quits on a series without
Yeah.
just constantly pushing through, um, and having to watch the degrade the slow degrade in quality as the movies start coming out. Like I said, you don't see it nearly as much nowadays because it's mostly remakes and reboots nowadays. But especially back in the late the
I mean,
80s
like,
and the 90s when it was just Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, Friday the 13th, and
look at Hellraiser now.
Hellraiser's a
I
good one.
mean,
Saw
I
was the
mean,
same way.
I mean, you've got, Hellraiser one, Hellraiser two is a good one, and then as they progress from that point, they just keep going down, and at some point, you got to call it quits. At some point, you want to you want to make a movie, you want to make a good movie, and the first one, maybe two, could be good movies. But then studios or whoever's funding it wants more money, and then they just kind of go, hey, we haven't done another Scream in a while, let's just slap one in there. And either, I mean, you can look at Hellraiser, it's the it even seems like the quality's going down. They're not getting released in movie theaters, they're getting released just on home release right away.
Blu-ray,
It's
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's just, yeah.
we before we move on, we got another question. Do you feel that documentary style horror films such as the Blair Witch Project are more effective than purely fictional horror films such as Saw, and why? So
Hmm.
that's a
Um,
it's a good one. I like that. I like that question a lot, actually.
I've never even really thought of it. Do you feel that documentary style films such as the Blair Witch Project are more effective than purely fictional horror films such as Saw, and why? Um, I think maybe in certain situations they can be, if you film it right and you promote it right. And I know Blair Witch kind of did that with the whole idea that it was found footage, so you were getting like the sense that, oh, this is really happening type of thing. I think Cloverfield was like that. The whole kind of shaky camera,
Quarantine
first
was
person.
also the same way.
Quarantine, yes. Quarantine. So yeah, I do think there is like a um there I think the documentary styles do tend to be a little bit more effective in that case, because you're looking at it from the perspective of the people there. A lot of the times, I guess you can think of it as kind of like first person to third person. You know, if you're doing like the documentary style where it's found footage or whatever, it's you feel like you might be that person behind that camera, in certain cases. So you're there, you're in the midst of it, you're having to, you know, be involved to an extent. While if you're watching just like regular horror movies like Saw or Texas Chainsaw, you're kind of looking at it from an outside perspective. These events are happening in front of you, but you're not technically involved, I guess you can say.
Yeah, and
Y-
you know, I I have to agree with that. Like, you you have I think it just depends on what you're going for. Like, honestly, like if you just look at it um from that standpoint, I think it just depends on what you want to go for when it comes to movies. That, like you said, the Blair Witch Project kind of ground broke that first person shaky camera. Oh, it's actually happening to them kind of thing. Um, I think it kind of downgraded in some senses as it got through, because it was a lot of like the cookie cutter style scenes, shaky camera, run, run, run. At the end, the camera
I
falls down, somebody gets yanked away, or something happens at the very tail end.
Yeah, I think that's the opposite of the documentary style, is that, you know like I said, like the best points are you're in the midst of it, you're involved in it, but I guess the big problem with it is that you're looking at it from a singular viewpoint. You're looking at it through the camera. And whatever the camera sees, you see. Instead of getting like the big, wide open picture that you would on a, typical horror film. So, um, and the shaky cam can get a little bit overboard sometimes because, you don't need all that shaking and continuous motion because, some people just get motion sick. You're trying to you're just like slow it down. I can't. You're missing things. It feels like sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Um, like I said, that was a great question. So let's talk for a minute about our plans for this podcast. Kind of, we've delved into our backgrounds and what we like, what we don't like, stuff like that. Um, honestly, and I think you'd probably agree with me, like our plans is to do exactly this, except, you know, break it down, um, into different series and talk about stuff on a certain subject and kind of break it apart. As you can probably guys can probably tell from our backdrop, the first series on our docket is A Nightmare on Elm Street. Um, it's a great series. It's a classic. Um,
Hmm. So it's got its ups and downs. It's like any typical horror movie. I mean, any anything. I mean, there's nothing really that's got more than 5 films and is great all the way through. There's always going to be a movie or two that's going to be like kind of a garbage movie, but um, yeah, I think with this podcast, I'm just what I'm hoping is for that we can spread our audience out a little bit, bring them in, and as as the title suggests, scary stories by the campfire. Um, just have a casual chat and just have a casual chat about the horror movies and stuff. So if we can get um, hopefully in the near future when we get larger audience, sit down, break down either movies, books, video games, uh, even some music we can even talk about because they got horror themed music out there. Um, but we can just sit down and have a conversation about all this stuff and hopefully have people want to come in and have chats with us through the chat or the who's it's and whatnots. It's just kind of a casual thing that we should
absolutely, and
get
with
more involved in.
absolutely, and with Twitch getting it first, we love for people to we would love for people to come in and ask us questions. Tell us stuff about these movies that y'all know that we may not know. We love to learn new stuff about these movies and about these books and you know about these TV shows and stuff like that. So we want to
Yeah, we'll
interact with all of y'all and you know yeah, we're hosting it, but we want this podcast is for everybody. We want everybody to be involved in it. We want everybody to ask questions and give us suggestions on what we should talk about the next series or stuff like that. So if you find us on YouTube and you're going through, leave us a comment down there, let us know what you want to hear us talk about. And
throw in your comments. Tell us,
absolutely,
we're
we're
when
very
we
open.
prep up for it. When we prep up for like a new episode, we're gonna hit the movie or whatever, read the book or whatnot. We're gonna know the material, sit down, discuss it, what we like, what we don't like, and uh, audience members are free to participate. Throw it in the comments. Hey, this is my favorite part of this book, or this is my favorite part of the movie, or I absolutely hated this movie. It was garbage. Why do you guys like it? And it's just a fun little chat.
Oh yeah, it's what we're excited for. And like I said, our first series will be A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's like like you said, Jason, that horror genre, it goes back to what we love about it. Is, it's so encompassing over so many different platforms. You have, like you said, books, music, movies, TV shows, video games. Put a video game. Dead by Daylight is a great horror video game.
Mm-hmm.
They put a
Spent
lot
a
of
lot of
thought
time on
into
Dead
it,
by
and
Daylight.
a lot of people play it. We'll talk about Dead by Daylight some and how some of these iconic slasher killers have been put into Dead by Daylight, to help boost that gang going. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so some of the places that you'll be able to find us uh, on the internet are obviously Twitch. Twitch gets everything first. Live streams come every Wednesday. That's our schedule. Every Wednesday. Um, and then it'll go to YouTube, and all the audio will go to all your streaming services: Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Podcast, whatever you listen to, it'll all get there. So if you miss an episode, you'll always be able to find it. Um, I'd like to send just a few shout outs for a minute. If you've been on any of our social media pages at the moment, our logo was done by Nick Gilbreth of Pensacola and the Pensacola Podcasters. Phenomenal people. He did an awesome job with it.
I absolutely agree. Jim sent. He said, "Hey Jason, you got to take a look at this. This is our logo," and I was like, "Yes, it has everything that it's got that classic style of like the old slasher film for the lettering, and it was beautiful."
Yeah. Also, one thing I did forget to mention that we would like to do, in the future is if there are any guests, anybody who wants to come jump in here with us, we'd be happy to have a couple people or a person, every couple episodes to join us in here and talk with us, um, especially lovers of the genres as much as we are. Uh, but we do got one more question, and I think this is actually a good question to close it out on. Jason, why did we pick Nightmare on Elm Street as our first one to introduce ourselves? And I think we've talked about this in great detail with each
Yeah,
other.
yeah, because we were going through and we were trying to figure out which movie series we should start with, and I think we chose Nightmare because it was a more popular title, but we didn't want to make it like something that everyone starts with because I think a lot of horror podcasts and stuff like that they may start with like Friday the 13th, Halloween. I know we haven't seen a new Nightmare movie for God. When was the remake done?
It's been a while. It was back in
Eh, eh,
2008, I believe, because I was still in high school when it came out.
so we haven't really had any sort of new Nightmare material. So, um, I mean, I think the most recent thing that even happened with Freddy recently was that he got put on Dead by Daylight. But we decided to pick it because we didn't want to do something real popular, but we didn't also want to go on the other side of the spectrum and do something like Dog Soldiers or something that if we put it out there, someone wouldn't know what it was. Like I had never heard of that movie or something like that, or Winter Beast. Remember that one,
Oh god,
Jeremy?
yeah.
Winter Beast. We just
Them.
started with that
Yeah. Me, I wanted to stay away from the. I wanted to stay away from starting with a B-side horror movie, because, you know, that's one of those things where, like, if we were to have started with Winter Beast, okay, nobody knows what Winter Beast is, okay, unless you have a Shutter account and you just decided, hey, I'm gonna watch this movie called Winter Beast, like I did, and
one.
was
Highly recommend that you watch that movie. Let me warn you, it is a it is a poor it's a bad movie. okay. It's a bad
It's
movie. I
B
mean,
side.
acting is bad. The special effects are bad. The story is bad. The the consistency of the plot is bad. But it is so bad that it's almost an enjoyable bad. It is like because I think me and you watched it, and um, uh, we had our friend Mary watching it with us, and I kid you not, I was looking at the movie half the time, going, "What is going on?" Like nothing made sense, but it was just so over the top that it was fun. It's a good awful movie to watch.
It's an enjoyable bad. But like you said, we didn't want to start with nothing that everybody starts with. Obviously, we'll get to those series, down the road. Um, but we wanted to start with something that would catch everybody's attention early and be able to create something with a good foundation to start with. And I think Nightmare on Elm Street really provides that stable foundation to start on. Because it is such a popular movie that it will grab everybody's attention and that it'll hold on to it long enough to help us um, grow this show out and grow it into something bigger so that when the time comes that we do get to those B-side movies like Horror Beat or Winter Beast, and Dog Soldiers and stuff like that, that though the people will still be like, oh, we love listening to them and we love talking with them and stuff like that. So yeah, let's go talk about this movie that I've never heard of before.
Yeah,
So
and we're gonna usually at the end of the episode we're gonna announce what we're gonna talk about next week. So like next Wednesday, if you care to join us, we're we're gonna be talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street. So if you own the movie, if you've seen the movie, and you have an interest, go ahead, rewatch it, refresh, come on back. We'll chat with you about it, and we'll do that with all the movies. So hopefully down the line, when we recommend something like um, the original Ring or The Fly, and you haven't watched those movies or seen those movies or anything like that, then you know maybe you'll have a new fresh perspective and watch the movie and come back and chat with us. So it's kind of what we're aiming for.
all right, guys. Well, we're about out of time here, so we will see y'all next Wednesday, same time, same campfire. Uh, Come on back and we'll share some stories. Y'all be safe out there.
All right.